white privilege. We talked a lot about. Thank you. Systematic racism or systemic racism. One thing that comes up in some of that sometimes is how do you fix those things, right? And one of the answers that's parroted a lot is reparations.
Yes.
Now, could it be fruitful? Should we go full-fledged into reparations? Should we not at all? Should there be some in between? What do you think about reparations?
I'll tell you this. Okay, so what we learned about reparations. So reparation is to pay back the people who helped you build or built your nation for you.
Okay.
So this is the deal. So the 20% in the South that had slaves,
sure,
a lot of them insured them.
Okay.
Insured them like livestock.
Sure.
And when slavery was over and they literally had to open the fence and let them walk out, they turned in their paperwork and said, hey, them slaves leaving, just like my horse being killed or being stolen, you got to pay me for that. And so they paid them for that. Okay. And then they took that money and then they built Chase, J.P. Morgan, all this stuff like that.
Okay.
And then they made fortunes and monopolies.
Okay.
Which the United States ran on for a while, and they still had their hands on, even when they busted up monopoly. JP's still making money.
Sure.
And they're saying, okay, we helped you build this. You insured a human like an animal. Mm-hmm. We should get some of this money that we...
And just to be clear, this is what you're narrating to me is what you were taught about reparations. Okay, keep going.
That we should get the money that we actually made with our labor. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. Okay. So, and they kept it. So in Civil War...
up to now, that makes sense in that time.
Yes.
Okay.
So they told them, hey, when we let you free, we're going to give you 40 acres and a mule to get you going.
Okay.
So you have land you already know how to farm.
That actually happened?
No, they never gave them. It was just propaganda.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to give you this, and we're going to, so you can get started.
40 acres of Death Valley?
Yeah, 40 acres of stuff like that.
Okay.
And we're going to give it to you, and because at the same time they were doing this, a couple of 50 years later, they were opening up Oklahoma.
Okay.
And they were giving out land to the Midwest and to the West.
Senators, yeah.
Yeah, they were giving away land. Yeah. And the black people showed up. It was like, hey, we're free. You're giving out land. They were like, yeah, not you.
Okay.
So fast forward now. They said, okay, you have made a nation off of these people's back. They deserve some money. They deserve what their work is equal to.
Perhaps?
What their work was equal to.
Okay.
So, but I don't think giving us, I ain't saying them like I'm not part of it, I'm a part of it. Giving us like a check, no, don't do it. So, but what I think should happen as like home ownership, I'm back to it. It should be.
I'm with you so far. Keep going.
Should be, far as you want to show a silent reparation. It should be a program or an easier way. I ain't saying give it away, but it should be laxed. If you know what's the magic number, 720 credit score.
Okay.
But now you can get a house for what, 620? You got 620. Yeah. If you got 620, you got 3%. You got the taxes that say you can afford it. The answer is yes, no matter what. If you got those three things. If you got a job, 4 things. You got a job that you can show me.
I'm going to let you finish that thought, but I got something for that.
Okay. If you got a job that you can show me 2 years or more taxes, you got 600 credit score, you got 3% down, the answer is yes. I don't care if you want that house in Highland Park or you want it on West Lambert. The answer is yes, and we're going to underwrite it.
Okay.
It's not going to be no questions of if, ands, or what about this, or what about that. If you pass it, the answer is yes.
Okay, so that's real interesting.
Second, if you go to school, I'm not giving you free money, but it ain't at 27%. I'm not even going to stop the compounded interest. Instead of it being at 27%, we gonna put it down to 15%
For what? Student loans?
for student loan.
Okay.
It's still gonna be at 15% compounded interest, not 29% compounded interest. That if you want to go to a trade school, we'll pay 50% of it. Any trade school, we'll pay 50% flat right off the top.
So in some respect, what you're describing is essentially what we actually have put in place for American Indians, Native Americans. I mean, they do have a lot of benefits and school paid for and things like that because they were obviously wronged as well.
Yeah. But see, America acknowledged that they did wrong and tried to make amends. But they never admitted any wrongdoing they admitted that slavery back in 2004, I think they wrote a deal that said that the slavery was wrong. But they also put in there that there will be no reparations.
Okay, so let's go back to your first main point, which is about the housing market, right? Okay, so you mentioned underwriting. So you've got to understand that part of underwriting is you're making a calculation on a certain number of these items are going to go into default, right? So
just like the GI Bill. Put it like that. Back it like you back the GI Bill.
That's right. And they calculate a certain number of those are going to go into default. And they have a system for dealing with those defaults, right? Okay. So if you, out of altruism, for lack of a better word, say, okay, we're going to take, black people with certain credit scores and bump them up a few points in order to qualify them for housing loans, you have to also know that a certain percentage of those are now going to be, statistically, are going to go into default. And
Don't bump them. Make them do the work. You got to come to the bank with the 600 credit score. You got to come to the bank with the 2 years.
But see, that already exists.
That exists, but the answer is an automatic.
If you go to the bank,
it's an automatic, unequivocal yes. No matter what else, them the only 4 requirements. Not no going back and forth. Not no, well, let us see about this and let us see about that. Well, you got to pay this car off first before.
Okay,
none
so
of that.
What you're really talking about is underwriting that is algorithm driven.
Yeah.
Pure numbers.
Yes.
Pure data.
Yeah.
And leaves no room for human input.
No, I'm talking about things like people they want to go get a house and they say, well, we would loan to you, but you still owe for this car.
Yeah.
No, none of that. You got those 4 things. The answer is yes. That's it. Not how many medical bills you have or how many cars you paying for. If your numbers say that with what you got going on, you can afford this, the answer is yes.
But you don't see that how the number of cars you have, the medical bills that you have, the medical debts you have are part of those numbers?
That's their problem. Banks deal with foreclosures every day.
True, but if you have 100 home loans and your normal default rate is 10 of those are going to default within the next 5 years, if you all of a sudden have to accept anybody that meets certain numbers, there's a potential that those defaults will not be 10 out of 100, but 15 out of 100.
I bet you
something has to pay for those extra 5 defaults.
You better get very good at it because the answer still should be yes. You better find you another outlet. You better get into the housing market. I don't know what you need to do, bank, but the answer needs to be yes. And if the government wants to back it like they back GI homes, that's great too. Student loan, we're going to put it at 15%. It's still going to be compounded interest. You're just going to pay 15%. And we're going to do this for a generation. Let's say 100 years. That's a nice round number. 100 years. And then after 100 years, it's over.
What do you do about the poor kid who's born at 101 years and doesn't have any of those advantages anymore?
Sucks to be you. These are the breaks. Ain't that what they tell us? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Well, I'm saying the same thing. I'm just flipping it.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll be fine.
Because, that's your argument to me earlier. is that
Yeah, just all I'm wanting this to do is to get this to a even playing field across the board, and let the.
And I
let
guess
the
all I'm saying
let
is
the
that-
strong survive.
I guess all I'm saying is that, if you extend certain privileges to a certain number of people for a certain number of years, there's always going to be more of that that's trying to be clawed
But I'm
back.
saying at that time, at that 100-year
Like,
mark,
where do you end it?
at that 100-year mark, all this stuff that's been perpetrated against us should be dissolved.
You think it'd take 100 years or less?
Yeah, 100 years, yes. It should
Yeah,
be.
I look at prior to the 60s,
Mhm.
how well statistically
Mhm.
black people were doing,
Mhm.
especially when compared to their own parents, right? And I think, man, they didn't have government involved nearly as much.
Mhm.
Much smaller government, much less social welfare programs, and they were able to, on their own, make dramatic changes in one generation, two generations. It was almost,
but the
given one more generation,
Yeah.
would have been no big deal.
Yeah.
We would all be starting
Mhm.
roughly in the same place on average.
Mm-hmm.